The most prepared people in America aren't the ones you see on YouTube showing off their bunkers. They aren't the guys with $5,000 gear loadouts or perfectly organized pantries. The truly prepared, the masters of survival, are the invisible ones sleeping in doorways tonight. They are living through the very collapse you are terrified of, and they are doing it right now with zero budget. Most modern survivalists, with all their theories and stockpiles, would fail their real-world test within 48 hours if they traded places. Why? Because while preppers focus on buying survival, homeless veterans focus on hacking survival. There is a profound difference in mindset. One technique involves something most preppers actively avoid, yet it completely changes everything you think you know about staying alive when the grid goes down. While most preppers obsess over finding the perfect 0-degree sleeping bag, the right thermal base layer, or maybe a space blanket that crinkles louder than a bag of chips at a movie theater, homeless veterans are sleeping warm using something you walk past every single day. It is free heat, it is already there, and it requires absolutely no gear to access. Here on Primal Methods, we look at what street survivors figured out decades ago. Your city is a battery, specifically a thermal battery. Brick, concrete, and stone don't just sit there looking pretty, they are massive thermal sponges. They absorb solar heat all day long, storing that energy deep within their dense structure. Then, as the sun sets and the air temperature plummets, they radiate it back out for hours. We are talking about a microclimate that is 10 to 15 degrees warmer than the surrounding air. In a survival situation, that is not a small difference. That is the massive gap between shivering uncontrollably all night, burning precious calories just to stay warm, and actually getting restful sleep. But here is the nuance that survival manuals miss. Not all walls are created equal. South-facing and west-facing walls hold the most warmth because they catch the afternoon sun when it is at its strongest. Dense materials like solid concrete or stone act as a thermal flywheel, smoothing out the temperature drop of the night. A hollow brick wall won't hold heat nearly as well as a solid concrete retaining wall. Yet, most preppers will just look for shelter without ever analyzing the thermal properties of the structure they are leaning against. And here is where the prepper mindset really misses the point. Wind kills faster than cold. A 20-degree night with a 15-mile-per-hour wind strips heat away from your body faster than you can generate it. It feels like single digits on exposed skin. Street survivors pick spots based on wind blockage first and temperature second. They look for the leeward side of buildings, the side protected from the prevailing wind. Preppers often choose the opposite because they are looking for concealment or a good vantage point, ignoring the physics of heat loss. Now let's talk about ground level. Retaining walls, loading docks, staircases, these are thermal gold mines. Heat rises, sure, but thermal mass at ground level releases stored warmth all night long directly into your back if you position yourself right. That park bench everyone gravitates toward? It is basically a cold metal heat sink that will suck the life out of you. But the real secret? Industrial buildings and parking garages. These structures aren't just solar batteries, they are mechanical ones. They store operational heat from heavy machinery, vehicles, and massive HVAC systems long after closing time. No fuel needed, no fire to attract unwanted attention, no permission required. Just borrowed warmth from yesterday's activity. Street survivors actually have a term for this. They call it borrowing yesterday's sun. I have never seen that phrase in a single prepper manual. Not one. The fancy gear approach works until it doesn't. Batteries die. Fuel runs out. Those chemical hand warmers last 8 hours if you are lucky. But a concrete wall? It has been radiating heat since humans discovered fire. But let's be honest, thermal mass is just the beginning. Staying warm means absolutely nothing if you are dead from dehydration. Most preppers can tell you exactly how many gallons of water they have stored in their basement. They have got Sawyer filters, purification tablets, maybe even a fancy UV pen. But ask them where to find water in a city when the taps go dry and the stores are looted? You get blank stares. Here is what homeless veterans figured out decades ago. Cemeteries. It sounds morbid, doesn't it? But those groundskeeper spigots often run 24/7, 365 days a year. Someone has to water the flowers, and nobody questions a somber person filling a water bottle near a grave. You are just visiting grandma. It's social camouflage at its finest. Then there are beach showers. Most preppers treat beaches as summer recreation spots. Meanwhile, plenty of coastal towns keep those outdoor showers running year-round to prevent salt corrosion and pipe damage. The water is cold enough to make your teeth file a formal complaint, but it is clean, it is pressurized, and it is free. Churches operate on a whole different level. Many intentionally leave exterior spigots accessible as a quiet act of charity. It is not advertised. No sign says free water here. But within homeless networks, this is common knowledge passed around like a family recipe. I learned about this from an old-timer who had been on the streets for 15 years. He had a mental map of every working church spigot in a 30-block radius. And the weird part? Timing matters more than any fancy gear. Early morning access, before the staff arrives, before the neighbors wake up, avoids attention and competition. Street survivors treat water runs like covert operations. Meanwhile, preppers stand around in broad daylight with their tactical water bottles, looking like paramilitary soldiers, wondering why security approached them. RV dump stations are another overlooked goldmine. Those portable water spigots exist specifically for filling tanks. Mobile homeless populations have used them for decades. Most campgrounds don't staff them heavily, making them easy targets for a quick refill. But my personal favorite, apartment complex pool equipment rooms. Even in winter, many of these systems stay pressurized for maintenance purposes. An unlocked gate and a quiet approach, and you have access to water most people forget exists. And here is a pro tip from Primal Methods that bridges the gap between homeless survival and urban prepping. Get yourself a Silcock key or a 4-way water key. It costs a few dollars at a hardware store. This simple tool opens the tamper-proof spigots found on almost every commercial building in America. The difference between homeless water strategy and prepper water strategy comes down to one thing. Preppers plan for what they carry. Street survivors plan for what is already there. Now, water keeps you alive, but it won't matter much if you are starving, and that is where timing becomes everything. Most preppers treat food like a math problem. Calories in, calories out, stockpile accordingly. But street survivors, they treat food like a bus schedule. Miss the timing, miss the meal. Here is what nobody tells you. Bakeries don't throw out bread randomly. They do it at the same time every single night, usually between 9 and 10 p.m. right before closing. Whether it's corporate policy or strict health codes, that bread hits the dumpster like clockwork. And the weird part is, it is often still in the original packaging, perfectly safe to eat. But forget dumpsters for a second. The real technique is what homeless veterans call the window method. Every food establishment has predictable discard windows. Grocery store delis mark down hot food exactly 2 hours before closing to clear the shelves. Pizza places often have a 30-minute rule on unclaimed orders before they toss them. Coffee shops pull pastries at specific times based on freshness labels. This isn't scavenging, it is scheduling. Now here is where it gets interesting. Staff behavior matters way more than asking permission. That employee taking a smoke break out back, they are your best friend. Not because they will hand you food directly, that could get them fired, but because those 5 minutes of inattention create opportunities that front counter begging never will. My uncle used to say, timing is everything except in comedy where it's the only thing. The same logic applies here. One relationship changes everything, though. A single night shift worker who knows your face, who sees you are not causing trouble, can quietly set aside items before they hit the trash. No charity organization required, no complex forms, no judgment. Just human connection beating bureaucracy like it always does. Then there is the delivery driver surplus, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub. Wrong addresses, no-shows, canceled orders happen constantly. Drivers aren't supposed to keep this food, but they are definitely not hauling cold Thai food around for 6 hours either. Smart survivors learn the delivery patterns at large apartment complexes. Food appears, food disappears. Nobody asks questions. But remember the danger zone for food safety. Bacteria multiply rapidly between 40 degrees and 140 degrees. Street survivors learn to touch the container. If it's still hot or ice cold, you're good. If it's lukewarm, you risk a stomach infection that could dehydrate you faster than thirst. The point isn't becoming a professional food scavenger. It is understanding that predictable systems create predictable gaps. Gaps that require zero stockpiling, zero investment, and zero permission. But food timing is just one schedule worth learning because street survivors track something else entirely, and it might be more valuable than calories. Here is something that will make your expensive bug-out bag feel a little silly. Street survivors almost never keep everything in one place. Meanwhile, preppers? We love our perfectly organized kits. Everything labeled, everything packed tight in a single tactical backpack, ready to grab and go. And that is exactly the problem. One police sweep, one theft, one drunk guy with sticky fingers, and it is gone. All of it. Your food, your shelter, your spare clothes, your medications, wiped out in under 30 seconds. This is a single point of failure that Primal Methods advises against. Homeless veterans figured this out decades ago. They run what I call satellite systems. A sleeping spot over here. A gear cache 3 blocks that way. A daytime rest location somewhere completely different. It is like having 3 mediocre hideouts instead of one perfect one. Sounds inefficient, right? Well, when city cleanup crews hit their main sleep spot last winter, they lost a blanket. That's it. Their food was hidden behind a loose panel in an abandoned loading dock. Spare clothes were stuffed inside a ceiling tile at an all-night laundromat. A phone charger was taped under a park bench. They never actually slept near the caches themselves. Nothing fancy, no buried PVC tubes or wilderness survival nonsense that requires a shovel. We are talking gaps in chain-link fence posts, spaces behind vending machines that haven't moved since the Reagan administration, drainage covers nobody checks because checking requires effort. But here is what really separates street thinking from prepper thinking. They never stay too long. 3 nights maximum in any single spot, because patterns get you caught. Security guards notice, neighbors complain, algorithms flag you. If you stay predictable, you become a target. Daytime rest happens somewhere completely legitimate. Library reading rooms, hospital waiting areas, college campus lounges during finals week when everyone looks half dead anyway. These are places where sleeping people don't automatically trigger police calls. The whole system prioritizes survivability over comfort. You might sleep worse. Your stuff might be harder to access, but you will still have stuff tomorrow. Most preppers plan like they will control their environment. Street survivors plan like the environment is actively trying to evict them, because it usually is. Now, redundant location solves storage problems, but what about power? Your expensive solar panel, the one you paid $200 for? It is sitting in your garage right now, waiting to get stolen the second things go sideways. Meanwhile, some guy living under a bridge has been running a phone, a fan, and a radio for 3 weeks straight. His power source? A car battery someone threw in a dumpster. Here is what preppers get wrong about power. They buy sleek, portable, expensive gear. Stuff that screams, "I have resources, please take them from me." Street survivors? They want ugly. They want heavy. They want something nobody in their right mind would bother stealing. A car battery that has been marked as dead by an auto shop usually holds 30 to 50% of its original charge. That is not enough to start a car, which requires a massive burst of cold cranking amps. But it is plenty to keep essential low-draw electronics running for weeks. All you need is a cheap 12-volt adapter. We are talking maybe $15 at any auto parts store. And the weird part is, this isn't some underground secret. Homeless camps have used this method for decades. It worked during Katrina when the grid died and cell towers went silent. People with fancy solar setups watched their panels get looted. People with beat-up car batteries hidden in milk crates. They kept communicating. But there is another angle most people miss entirely. When emergencies hit, public charging stations turn into war zones. I am not exaggerating. During major blackouts, fights break out over wall outlets. Actual physical fights over electricity. Your hidden, ugly power source doesn't just work better, it keeps you out of conflict zones where desperate people congregate. The formula at Primal Methods is dead simple. Find discarded batteries at auto shops. Test them with a basic multimeter. Keep them low. Keep them hidden. Keep them boring looking. Nobody steals what looks like garbage. My grandfather used to say, "The best tool is the one that still works when everything fancy breaks." He was talking about his old hand drill, but the principle applies perfectly here. Now, staying powered is only half the equation because when you get hurt, most preppers realize their medical plan has a massive hole in it. Most preppers stockpile medications like they are collecting Pokemon cards. A bottle of this, some antibiotics from that fish supply store, maybe some painkillers if they got lucky. And look, having supplies matters. But here is what nobody tells you until they are actually sick and desperate. Federally qualified health centers exist in almost every American city. By law, they cannot turn you away for lack of ID or insurance. That is federal law, not a suggestion. Street survivors have known this for decades. Most preppers? They will sit on an infected wound rather than walk into a clinic they never knew existed. Dental schools are another goldmine. Yeah, you are basically a practice dummy for students. But that supervised student is cleaning your teeth or pulling a rotten molar for maybe $20 while your neighbor paid $200 for the same service. The trade-off? Time. Appointments take forever. Bring a book. Bring 2 books. Now here's something I learned the hard way that we emphasize at Primal Methods. Hospital social workers are basically cheat codes that nobody uses. You don't just show up, get treated, and leave drowning in bills. You ask for the social worker. They know every assistance program, every payment plan, every charity fund that hospital has buried in its system. Regular patients never ask. Homeless patients always ask. The medication knowledge that circulates in homeless communities would shock most preppers. Which pharmacies have patient assistance programs? Which manufacturers give away insulin? Which clinics stock samples they will hand out freely? This information spreads person to person, not through forums or YouTube videos. Free clinics follow predictable schedules. Tuesday morning here, Thursday evening there. Street survivors map these patterns like generals planning campaigns. Meanwhile, preppers are hoarding expired aspirin. And Narcan, it is free now in most states. You can walk into a pharmacy and get it without a prescription. A tool that literally reverses overdose death within minutes. Yet most preppers don't carry it because they assume it's not their problem. Emergencies don't care about your assumptions or your moral high ground. If a family member makes a mistake or touches something they shouldn't in a collapse scenario, that Narcan is worth more than gold. But medical access requires one thing most preppers forget entirely, and it has nothing to do with health. Preppers obsess over shelter, walls, roof, door, done. But homeless veterans? They aren't looking for shelter. They are reading heat like a map. And that difference keeps them alive when temperatures drop below freezing. Here is what I mean. Every building in a city is basically a giant radiator with an exhaust system. HVAC units push warm air outside 24/7. That exhaust creates invisible heat zones that don't show up on any survival checklist. Stand 3 feet from the right vent, and you are in a warm pocket that feels 10 degrees higher than the air around you. No gear required. No fire. No attention. Now let's talk parking garages. Most preppers walk right past them. Big mistake. Heat rises, right? Well, garages trap that rising warmth on upper levels, while ground-level security focuses on entrances. The 3rd floor of a parking structure at 2 a.m. is often warmer than your apartment hallway, and emptier too. Then there are laundromats. Those industrial dryers run hot for hours even after closing. The exterior walls store that heat like a brick oven. I have personally felt walls stay warm until nearly midnight in winter. You don't need to go inside, just find the drier side wall and lean against it. Pedestrian tunnels are another overlooked gem. Underground passages stay remarkably stable temperature-wise. During deep freezes, these tunnels might be 40 degrees while the surface hits single digits. City planners didn't design them for survival, but that is exactly what they provide. And the weird part? ATM vestibules work too, but only briefly. Street rules say 15 minutes maximum before someone notices or security arrives. It is not a campsite. It is a warming rotation point, in and out. See the pattern here? None of this requires equipment. It requires observation. Preppers pack their bags heavier, while homeless survivors pack their knowledge deeper. My uncle used to say, "A smart man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from someone else's." Street survivors have been field testing urban heat for decades. But staying warm is only half the battle. What happens when you can't wash for a week? That is where things get genuinely dangerous. Here is something most preppers never think about until it is too late. You can have all the food, water, and shelter you need. But if you get a skin infection that spreads, or trench foot that makes walking impossible, you are done. Game over. And the weird part is, staying clean doesn't actually require water. Street survivors figured this out decades ago. Baby wipes are the foundation, but here's the trick nobody tells you. Keep them in your pocket, close to your body. Warm wipes clean better than cold ones. They also feel less miserable at 5 in the morning when you are trying to handle business in a gas station bathroom. Cold wipes make you rush. Rushing makes you sloppy. Sloppy gets you sick. Then there is the cornstarch secret. Fungal infections don't care about your bug-out bag. They care about moisture trapped against skin, and they spread fast. I am talking about infections that can take someone from mobile to barely walking in 3 days. Street veterans dust their feet and anywhere skin touches skin with plain cornstarch. Grandma's baking supply costs almost nothing. It works better than half the expensive powders preppers stockpile. Rubbing alcohol? It pulls double duty when you dilute it right. Full strength damages skin and dries it out. Cut it with water and you have got a sanitizer that handles hands, armpits, and gear surfaces. One bottle lasts weeks, but the foot situation deserves extra attention. Trench foot isn't ancient history. It still happens in modern cities. The fix isn't complicated. Rotate your socks. Seriously, that is it. Take off wet socks. Let feet air out for even 15 minutes. Put on dry ones. No water needed. Yet preppers pack 17 fire-starting methods in only 1 pair of socks. Now here is a resource most people walk right past. Public pools. For about $5, you get a hot shower, clean facilities, and a legitimate reason to sit somewhere warm for hours. Homeless communities have used this for years. Preppers, they are still hauling solar showers they have never tested. Staying clean keeps you functional, but survival isn't just about maintaining yourself. It is about knowing when resources appear and disappear. Preppers love their stockpiles. Rows of canned goods, neatly organized bins, spreadsheets tracking expiration dates like it is a second job. But here is what nobody talks about. Street survivors don't count cans, they count Tuesdays. Let me explain. Every city runs on invisible schedules. Food banks open specific days. Churches serve meals on rotating nights. Clothing closets operate weekly windows. And homeless veterans have these calendars memorized better than most people remember their own anniversaries. One guy I met carried a worn index card. Nothing fancy, just abbreviations and times. SBM 9 meant Salvation Army breakfast Monday 9 a.m. CCW 6 was community church dinner Wednesday 6 p.m. That single card guaranteed him 21 meals weekly without spending a dime. Meanwhile, preppers stockpile 6 months of freeze-dried food and never learn their own city's resource rhythm. Makes sense, right? Well, the timing goes deeper. SNAP benefits hit accounts on specific dates based on case numbers, which means food bank crowds spike predictably. Show up 2 days after the rush. Shorter lines, better selection, same resources. Then there is the fiscal year trick. Government agencies and nonprofits must spend allocated budgets before the fiscal year ends. September and March create temporary abundance. Suddenly there is extra funding for emergency housing. Additional food distribution events appear. Clothing drives seem to pop up from nowhere. Street survivors track these windows like farmers track planting seasons. Shelter demand follows weekly patterns too. Weekends bring recreational drinkers and temporary crises. Midweek, calmer, more beds, less chaos. But the real gold comes during weather emergencies. When cities declare cold emergencies or heat advisories, resources unlock that don't exist otherwise. Cooling centers open. Warming buses run routes. Hotels get vouchers for overflow capacity. Most housed people never learn these systems exist until they need them. The homeless community? They are already positioned. This isn't about memorizing one schedule. It is about understanding that time itself becomes a resource when you stop thinking like someone with a stocked pantry. Your stockpile can be stolen, burned, or confiscated, but knowledge of when and where. That is theft proof. Now, having resources means nothing if you get kicked out before using them. And that brings us to something preppers almost never practice: social camouflage. It might be the single most undertrained skill in all of prepping, and honestly, it is the one that matters most when everything else fails. Here is what I mean. Preppers spend hundreds of hours learning to hide. Concealment, camouflage, blending into forests and rural terrain. But surviving in a city during a crisis? That requires something completely different. You don't need to disappear. You need to belong. Street survivors figured this out decades ago. A clipboard and a reflective vest will get you into places a tactical backpack never could. I once watched a homeless guy walk straight through a hospital security checkpoint carrying a mop bucket. Nobody looked twice. Meanwhile, some prepper type with a $500 bug-out bag got stopped 3 times in the same building. The difference isn't gear, it is context. Campuses are gold mines for this. Libraries, cafeterias, study lounges, all accessible if you look like you are supposed to be there. Same with hospitals. Waiting rooms have free Wi-Fi, climate control, and vending machines. Nobody questions a guy who looks worried about a family member. But show up looking tactical. Security finds you in minutes. And the weird part is the solution costs almost nothing. Earbuds. That is it. Earbuds signal purpose. They say, I am going somewhere, instead of, I am loitering. A phone charger in your hand explains why you are sitting in that corner. A takeout coffee cup justifies an hour in a fast food lobby. Clothing matters too, but not how preppers think. Matching the location beats matching the season. A polo shirt in a business district, scrubs near a hospital, a hoodie and backpack on a college campus. You are not hiding, you are fitting in. Then there is timing. Shift changes create accountability gaps. The guard who saw you arrive leaves. The new guard assumes you belong. Street survivors exploit this constantly. Preppers almost never do. Look, all the gear in the world won't help if you get removed from your position before you can use it. Belonging beats hiding every time. That wraps up our 10 techniques here at Primal Methods. The homeless have survived for generations using methods that cost nothing but observation and timing. Maybe it is time preppers started paying attention.